Howdy, folks. Before I jump into chapter 9, I hope that you'll indulge me while I go off on a little mini rant. This isn't a big deal, but it's something that bothered me after the recording yesterday. I've mentioned before, I think back when I first started reading the original Thrawn trilogy, that Timothy Zahn has a tendency to create uh, names and location place names and sometimes objects with unpronounceable or strangely pronounced uh, names and words and such that he creates for the narrative. Yesterday, while reading the section while a disguised Luke gets a meal, I pronounced his space ribs as rye beans, and that bothered me the whole time that I was reading it for the rest of the chapter. I just hit the word, and I had to quickly decide how do I say this. I think it's a little ridiculous that he couldn't just call them ribs. I'm pretty sure that animals and creatures in the Star Wars universe do not describe those bones as rye beans, but there you go. I hope you guys will go along with me on that. I apologize for the weird pronunciation and for any other words that I murder as we go through the course of reading these novels. Anyway, getting that out of the way, here we are on chapter 9. Offhand, I can't think of a time, Mara had to admit, gazing out the starry ice's bridge viewport at the asteroid field stretched out in front of them. Though I have to say that taking on a whole nest of pirates alone is beyond even your usual audacity level. What are you doing in there, anyway? Attempting to get out, the other answered dryly. What are you doing here? Card asked me to check on you, she said. Seemed to think you might need a hand. That I do, he conceded. Where are you? At the moment, on the outside looking in, Mara told him, frowning. Had that been an explosion over there on the Cavril-Who's main asteroid? Are you setting off bombs or something? No, but somebody is. I can hear explosions in the distance. Can you see what's happening? Seated at the next console, Captain Shirley Fawn tapped Mara's arm. Take a look at the starboard end of the asteroid, she murmured, pointing. We've got a flotilla heading for deep space. I make it 18 ships. Terrific, Mara muttered. You've got trouble, Luke. Your rats are staging a mass desertion. Fawn's got readings on 18 ships, probably more on the way. 10 to 1 those explosions you're hearing are the base's self-destruct system kicking in. You got any transport? I had a Y-60 freighter when I came in with R2 and a hidden X-Wing aboard, Luke said. But I haven't been able to raise him. Well, don't panic yet, Mara advised, giving the displays a quick glance. They're still jamming your primary comlink frequency. We just happen to have the equipment to sneak in on a harmonic. How far are you from your landing bay? I don't know exactly. Fawn snapped her fingers, pointing to one of Mara's displays. Hold it, Mara cut in. Their jamming's just gone off. Let me release your comlink back to the primary freak. She looked across the bridge at the comm station. Corvus? Already cleared, the other reported. I'll key you back in on the primary. Abruptly, the comm speaker burst into a staccato flow of astromech droid machine language. Slow down, R2, Luke's voice cut in through the warbles and squeals. I can't understand a thing you're saying. He says he and the X-Wing are okay, Mara told him, watching as the translation scrolled across her computer display. They were coming for him, so he popped the X-Wing out of its hiding place. She grimaced. And chased them away by blasting the landing bay's atmosphere shield generators. There was a long moment of silence. Which I presume means the landing bay is now full of hard vacuum? Luke asked. Up to its brim, Mara confirmed. I suppose it would be too much to hope that there might be a vac suit locker near the bay somewhere. I don't know, but I wouldn't want to count on it, Luke said. Me neither, Mara agreed. Fawn, you used to fly Y-60s, didn't you? More often than I care to remember, the other woman said. You thinking about him trying a cold shirt crossing? It's the simplest way to get him out of there, Mara said. Can he do it? I doubt it, Fawn said. Skywalker, is the freighter's landing ramp up or down? Down, last I knew. The R2 unit twittered, the droid's confirmation scrolling across the display. It's still down, Mara said. In that case, not a chance, Fawn said, shaking her head. The Y-60's ramp mechanism is a piece of junk. Getting it sealed and repressurizing the ship would take at least 15 minutes. I was afraid of that, Mara said. A little long for him to hold his breath. What about his X-Wing? Fawn suggested. It can't take very long to pressurize a cockpit of that size. Except that most fighter canopies are pressure locked these days, Mara pointed out. Opening them to vacuum without squeezing the manual override usually pops the ejector seat. It's a safety mechanism. I don't think the R2 can override it. You're right, he can't, Luke said. I better hope I can find a vac suit. Sure. Mara hissed softly between her teeth, measuring the distance to the asteroid with her eyes. The chances that the pirates would have vac equipment within handy reach of potential escapees were somewhere between slim and none. In case you can't, we're coming in. Out of the corner of her eye, she saw Fawn turn startled eyes on her. Jade, we don't know the safe path in, the other woman muttered. No, but Skywalker's astromech droid does, Mara reminded her. Droid, how about feeding us some numbers? The R2 warbled acknowledgement, and a course layout appeared on the computer display. Got it, Mara said. Let's go. Fawn turned back to the helm, still obviously less than enthusiastic about risking her ship this way. There was a brief surge of acceleration, and the starry ice began moving forward. The path doesn't look too bad, Mara said, studying the display. It didn't, the captain said, tapping her nav display. There's just one slight problem. The asteroids aren't in the same relative positions anymore. Mara shifted her attention to her own nav display. Fawn was right. Blast it, they've scrambled it, she said, getting out of her chair and heading for the door. We'll have to bantha roll our way in. I'll take number 1. Get Elkin and Torv to the others. She had reached her turbolaser station and was strapping in when Fawn signaled. We've just tripped an automatic beacon warning us away, the captain reported. Ought to be hitting the first wave of trouble any time. Understood, Mara said, kicking the turbolaser into emergency warm-up and wishing for about the 20th time this trip that the Jade's fire wasn't stuck on Daroon getting its nav systems refitted. Card had done a good job of arming his freighters, but the fire had as much sheer laser power as the starry ice, and a lot more maneuverability on top of it. But it wasn't here, and there was nothing she could do about it. Rubbing her palms briefly on her jumpsuit to dry them, she got a firm grip on the controls and stretched out to the Force. She might not be as glorious and powerful a Jedi as the great Luke Skywalker, but she'd be willing to match her finely honed danger sense against his any day. The problem was that the danger sense wasn't particularly directional, and there were a lot of different directions out there for trouble to come from. Here we come, Luke, she called into her headset. Last chance for you to wave your hand and sweep all the traps away. The instant the words were out of her mouth, she was sorry she'd said them. Luke was too far away for her to fully touch his mind, but even so, she could sense him wincing from her remark. She opened her mouth to apologize, and suddenly her danger sense flared, an asteroid drifting along nearby catching her full attention. She spotted the circle of unnatural smoothness on its edge, the faint glint of metal. Her turbolaser flashed, shattering the suspect asteroid into rocks and rubble. From the expanding dust cloud came a single reflexive burst of answering turbolaser fire. Too little, too late, and well wide of its target. Good shooting, Mara, Elkin's voice in her ear. Mara nodded, too preoccupied with her task and her guilt over that snide remark to reply. Her guilt and a growing annoyance at herself for feeling guilty in the first place. After all, it was Skywalker and his apprentice Jedi, not her, who were playing fast and casual with their power. If having someone pointed out bothered him, that was his problem, not hers. There was another flicker of warning, but before she could identify the source of the danger, multiple shots of red fire lanced out from Torv's turbolaser and a string of small boulders exploded, prematurely into clouds of knife-edged shrapnel bursts. Mara winced as a few stray shredders bounced off the starry ice's deflector shield in front of her canopy, and then the ship was past that trap and on its way to the next. Resettling her fingers on the controls, Mara again stretched out to the Force. Among the 3 of them, they had blasted 8 more traps by the time the starry ice reached the main base. We're here, Fawn's voice announced in Mara's ear. Skywalker, where are you? I'm at my landing bay, Luke replied. R2, fire a few blasts at the rim to mark it. The droid beeped, and a shadow between two rocky ridges flickered with laser fire. Okay, we've got you, Fawn said. Coming in. The laser flashes stopped, and as they did, another of the muted explosions flickered on the asteroid's surface, uncomfortably close to the target bay. There goes another blast, Mara said. You've been missing most of the performance out there, Luke said. I've been hearing one go off every 10 seconds or so. They seem to be working their way my direction. Another explosion flashed, this one even closer to the landing bay. Too close, if you ask me, Fawn grunted. You sure you want to risk putting down there, Jade? Not especially, Mara conceded. But we don't seem to have a lot of choice. You're going to owe us big for this one, Luke. I'll put it on your account, Luke promised. Better hurry. No, wait! Back off! What? Fawn asked. You heard him, Mara snapped as her own danger sense tinkled. Back off! The starry ice lurched back, and as it did so, one of the ridges framing the landing bay began crackling with sequential blasts like an Endor Day multi-stage show rocket. Jade, this is crazy, Fawn said. I can't put down there. The whole area could go any time. She's right, Luke said. And as Mara stretched out to the force, she felt a subtle grimness touch his emotions. I guess we've only got one option left. Wave your hand and sweep all the traps away? What's that? She asked aloud. I'll have to meet you halfway, he said. You have a docking bay that'll handle my X-Wing? We've got a pair of half-ports with tractor assists, Fawn told him. They'll put an air seal around the cockpit anyway. Good. R2, get out there right now and dock with them. Wait a second, Mara cut him off. There was something in Skywalker's voice and thoughts that told her he was about to try something really stupid. You're not thinking of cold shirting it all the way out to us, are you? We can't get in close enough for that. I know, Luke said. I'm going to have to go into a Jedi hibernation trance as soon as I clear the blast door. She'd called it all right. Something really stupid. And how are you expecting to accomplish that? She demanded. You'll have to go into the trance right after you've blown the door. That won't leave you any air reserve. If I cut open the door properly, there should be a burst of air that comes out with me, Luke pointed out. That ought to give me enough to start the hibernation as well as nudging me your direction. You've got rotten odds. Last-ditch options are like that, and if we take too much time discussing it, we won't have any odds at all. Sounds like one of Solo's lines, Mara growled. But he was right, and as if to emphasize his words, the other flanking ridge began its own disintegration. You win. Let's do it. Right, Luke said. R2, get going. The droid gave an unhappy twitter, but the X-Wing lifted obediently out of the landing bay and headed towards the starry ice. Fawn, Mara called. Tractor assist is ready at the half-port, Fawn said. The outer lock of the starboard airlock is open with an atmospheric barrier in place, and Crickle's standing by inside with a med pack. We're ready whenever he is. You copy that, Luke? Yes, he said. I'll set up the phrase, welcome aboard, to snap me out of the trance. Welcome aboard. Right. Okay, here we go. Don't miss me. Mara smiled tightly. Don't miss me. Once those words would have had a totally different connotation for her. Luke Skywalker and her blaster sights, the Emperor's dying command that she kill the upstart Jedi echoing through her mind. But she'd gone through that crisis 10 years ago inside Mount Tantus, and the Emperor's voice was now only a distant and powerless memory. Skywalker would have his own crisis to go through one of these days. Maybe he was in the middle of it right now. She hoped so. There was a flicker from Luke's emotions. Mara concentrated, visualizing the flash of his lightsaber as the green blade slashed through the thick metal of the blast door. And then, abruptly, he vanished. Fawn, Mara called, closing her eyes as she stretched out as hard as she could. But Luke's presence was no longer detectable, at least not by her. Either he'd gone into his hibernation trance or else he was dead. Here he comes, Fawn said. Mara opened her eyes. He was there, all right, looking like a broken puppet as he glided rapidly towards the starry ice. His limbs flailed limply as his body tumbled slowly end over end, the flickering light from the asteroid's ongoing self destruction adding a surreal air to the whole scene. With a jolt that startled her, the starry ice began moving down towards the surface. Fawn, maneuvering the ship to match Luke's trajectory, or rather, trying to match it. Mara frowned at the approaching figure, trying to extrapolate its trajectory and impact speed. Fawn, with access to the ship's computer, got the answer first. We've got trouble, she said tightly. With the speed I'm having to use to catch him, he's either going to bounce off the hull or else hit the back airlock wall hard enough to break his neck. You just get him inside, Mara said, hitting the quick release on her restraints and scrambling to her feet. I'll make sure he lives through it. He was almost there by the time Mara reached the airlock, cartwheeling towards them far faster than was healthy. Computer says we're right on target, Fawn's voice called over the speaker as Mara peered through the atmospheric barrier. Impact in 10 seconds. Taking a deep breath, Mara braced herself against the airlock bulkhead and stretched out to the Force. The Emperor had taught her the basics of using the Force to move objects, rudimentary training that Skywalker himself had developed further during their trek through the Wayland Forest, and later for a brief time at that Yavin Academy of his. She'd kept up practice on her own after that, and had thought she'd become pretty proficient with the technique. But moving small objects like her lightsaber was one thing. Catching Luke as he fell towards her was something else entirely, rather like trying to stop the starry ice with her teeth. She threw everything she had into the effort, dimly aware that her whole body had gone rigid with the strain, fighting to at least slow him down before he barreled past her through the atmosphere barrier. She could sense him slowing, knew it wouldn't be enough, and at the last possible second she stepped away from the bulkhead directly into his path. He slammed into her full tilt, the impact driving both of them back and down. Welcome aboard, Mara gasped, an instant before the two of them slammed together to the deck. A landing that was considerably less painful than she had expected it to be. She blinked, trying to shake the lingering stars from her vision. Thank you, Luke murmured into her ear. The stars cleared, and Mara found herself looking up into a strange face. Luke's face, she realized, heavily disguised. He was straddling her, hands and feet on the deck, apparently having come out of his trance just in time to take his share of the impact instead of adding extra dead weight to hers. You're welcome, she managed. Nice disguise. Thanks, he said. It worked, too, mostly. Mostly doesn't count for much, does it? She said. How come you didn't use a force illusion like you had before? I've been trying to cut back on my use of the Force except when absolutely necessary, he explained. It didn't seem necessary in this case. Ah, Mara said. That was interesting. Very interesting indeed. So, you want to get off me, or were you just getting comfortable? Oh, sure, he said awkwardly, some of that old farm boy embarrassment flicking across his face as he scrambled off her. Sorry. No problem, Mara said, getting to her feet and running a critical eye over him. Some nasty-looking shrapnel tears in his clothing, with what were probably some equally nasty injuries underneath them. Looks like you need a pass through the medical bay. No time, he said, shaking his head. I'm okay for now, and we've got to get out of here. Did my X-Wing get docked? I don't know, Mara said, slapping the control pad to close the outer airlock door. Fawn? It's been secured in B-port, the captain said. Skywalker, you know a safe route out of this death trap? I used to, Luke said, keying the inner door. It's probably not any safer than any other path now. We'll follow the pirates, Mara decided, waving Crickle away as he hurried up with his med pack and leading Luke down the corridor towards the Starry Ice's half ports. They'll probably shoot at this, but you can't have everything. Problem. We seem to have run out of pirates to follow, Fawn said. Nothing's left the asteroid in nearly 2 minutes. Mara felt her stomach muscles tighten. Which means the grand finale of their self-destruct system is probably ticking down right now. Probably, Fawn agreed. What do we do? Pick a direction and go? More or less, Mara told her. Start pulling away from the main base, but not too fast. I want to be on my turbo laser before we get into anything nasty. Give me time to get out there too, Luke added. I can run ahead of you and trigger the traps. Only if you can see them coming, Mara pointed out, giving him a hard look. I've got a better danger sense than you do. Maybe I should take your ship and break trail. I can do it, he said firmly. Anyway, it's my responsibility. You're here because of me. He had a point. If that's how you want it, Mara said, pointing down the corridor. Take the first left, then break right. Make it fast. She needn't have worried. By the time she reached her turbolaser station, the X-Wing was already burning space ahead of them. I'm ready, she announced as she strapped in again. Get going, Luke. Good luck. May the Force be with you, he said, with what she decided was probably mild reproof. Stay sharp. The trip in through the asteroids had been nerve-wracking. The trip out, to Mara's surprise, was almost casually easy. Time and again, the X-Wing would shift course slightly and fire, setting off a distant cluster trap or shredder bomb or automatic turbolaser nest, usually before Mara's own danger sense had even triggered. It quickly settled into a pattern. The X-Wing would maneuver, fire, and dodge, with the starry ice falling stolidly behind, its own turbolaser crew needing to do only occasional cleanup work. Whether by design or accident, Luke seemed to be running slightly above the freighter, doing his most thorough job of minesweeping within Mara's angle of fire. Most of the cleanup work thus wound up in Elkins or Torv sectors, leaving Mara little to do except help watch for any surprises the pirates might have left behind, wait patiently for them to clear the asteroid field, and wonder darkly if Luke was deliberately being overprotective just to annoy her. It was on one of her visual sweeps of the sky ahead that she spotted the ship. Her initial thought was that it was a TIE fighter. It was similarly sized and at first glance had something of the same silhouette, but even as she opened her mouth to alert the others, the craft made a turn. We've got company, she snapped, poking near the edge of the asteroid field at about 20 by 50. Got it, Fawn says. Looks like. What does it look like? You got me, Mara said. I thought it was an Imperial, but those aren't TIE solar panels on its sides. Whatever they are, it's got two more of them flaring aft at the tail, Elkin pointed out. Doesn't necessarily mean it's not an Imperial, Fawn grunted. Skywalker, you're up on current Imperial starfighter designs, aren't you? Not really, Luke said, his voice showing signs of the strain as he was forced to split his attention between the intruder and the more immediate task at hand. I'd never seen anything like that before, though. Mara gazed out at the distant spacecraft. Clearly it was watching them. Did it realize they'd spotted it? I think one of us ought to try for a closer look, she said. Let's not, shall we? Fawn growled. We don't need to borrow any more trouble than we've already got. Besides, with our luck, it'd just be another of those useless Quella things, Corvus added scornfully. Like the one Lando Calrissian chased all over space. I say we take a look, Mara said, putting the firmness in her voice that made it an order. Luke, you're the faster ship. You want to see if you can catch it? I can try, he said, an odd tone to his voice. Was he feeling the same thing about the ship that she was? Can you spare me? I think so, Mara said. We have to be pretty close to the edge of the pirates' defense sphere by now. Okay. R2, get all the recorders and sensors going. We're going to want a complete record of this. The droid beeped acknowledgement, and with a suddenness that's even surprised Mara, the X-Wing angled off and shot towards the intruder. It dodged past the drifting asteroids, cutting close beside them for the maximum of cover. Mara kept her turbolaser targeted on the other spacecraft, wondering tautly whether they would choose to fight or run. But the X-Wing was still closing, and so far there was no reaction. Could the intruder somehow be looking the other direction? Ridiculous. So what was it waiting for? Luke was nearly to close combat distance now. Behind him, a stray asteroid floated leisurely between the intruder and Mara's line of sight. Her only warning was a sudden jolt in Luke's emotions. An instant later, she caught a single glimpse of the intruder as it flicked at incredible speed across the sky, making for the edge of the asteroid field. There he goes, Torv yelped as Mara tried to swing her turbolaser around to target the distant spacecraft. But too late. Even as she fought to get a lock on it, another asteroid cut across between them, again blocking her view. There was the flicker of pseudo-motion from the asteroid's edge, and the ship was gone. Someone on the intercom swore softly. I give up, Fawn said. What the blazes was that? You got me, Mira said. Luke, you still there? Right here, Luke replied. Did you get all that? Only part of it, Mira told him. He waited until we were blocked by an asteroid before making his move. Interesting, Luke said. The ship gave off a very unusual energy signature as he took off. I recorded what I could of it, but I doubt my sensors were able to pick up more than a fraction of what was really there. Maybe that's why he waited until we couldn't see him. Probably, Luke agreed. He'd have guessed a ship of your size would have better sensors than mine. Mira rubbed her lips. Well, unless you want to follow his hyperspace vector, there's not a lot we can do about him right now. How about feeding us what your sensors got? The astromech droid made a rude sound. It's all right, R2, Luke soothed. We could consider this their rescue fee. Part of their rescue fee, Mira corrected. We'll settle on the rest later. Understood, Luke agreed. Here it comes. Got it, Fawn said. Thanks, Mira said. You need anything else, Luke? Not at your prices, he said dryly. Seriously, thanks for everything. Glad we could help, Mira said. Don't forget to have those injuries looked at. I won't, he assured her. R2's already pulling up a list of the nearest New Republic medical facilities. See you later. Right. Watch yourself. The comm clicked, and with a flicker of pseudo-motion, the X-Wing made its jump to light speed. Mara gazed after it, a strange mixture of emotions chasing each other through her mind. The glowing report she'd read of Luke's glorious achievements, and yet they were a far cry from what she'd seen him do just now. Had something happened to him, or was he finally coming to his senses? Jade? Fawn asked. What now? Mara exhaled softly, putting Skywalker out of her mind. We shoot a report off to Card, she said, doing a quick time calculation. See if he wants us to get back on schedule for the Noskin rendezvous, or else try to track the pirates' escape route. Right, Fawn said. Incidentally, Jade, in case no one's ever mentioned it before, you and Skywalker make a pretty good team. Mara gazed out at the drifting asteroids. Bite your tongue, Fawn, she said softly. Bite your tongue. That's the end of the chapter. Something I haven't mentioned before is that the last time I read this book is actually when it first came out. I've only read this series once, and I think it was released in about 96, if my memory is right. So there's an awful lot of this series that I don't remember. I think I do remember most of the main beats, but it's been kind of interesting because I can't rely on my own memory to try and figure out what's going on ahead of time. So I'm having to pay a little bit more attention while reading. Just a little bit of trivia. It doesn't really matter to the story, but I thought you might be interested. Anyway, that's it for this chapter. I hope you guys enjoyed it, and I'll talk to you all again real soon.